Hello and welcome to Tribal Research Specialists, the podcast, where we will be talking about important things. That's not going to work either. Hello and welcome to Tribal Research Specialists, the podcast, a podcast dedicated to chatting about. Hello and welcome to.
You gave me a recording of it once.
I believe it.
Solution, I listened to it for a long time. And I always can quote it, but I don't remember he did a bunch of impressions. That impression of Bush.
Yeah, he's like,
you're telling me there's a dog that can talk.
You're telling me that there's a dog that can talk. I believe it.
Yeah. Who was that?
Wasn't it Will Ferrell?
I don't know.
Did you ever see that video of Will Ferrell acting like George Bush, interviewing George Bush? Like he's like, if there's one thing you would do over during your presidency, what would be? He's like, that flight suit I wore when I said mission accomplished. I would have wore that every day.
Yes.
He's like, it says, nothing says commander in chief. That's how he does it.
Yes. So what you got, man?
Are we started?
Yeah. We're going. We're doing it.
Okay.
Doing it.
My thought today, I had a pretty what I would determine as a unique experience.
Okay. Unique as in
in
outside of the
outside of the norm.
Okay.
99.99% of the world will never have to do what I did today, which was go before the National NAGPRA Committee.
Okay.
Which is, as I was told, the equivalent of the Supreme Court for NAGPRA. So it's like for claims, human remains, items of patrimony, things like that. It's all based on the Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act.
Yeah.
But while I was in there, just kind of, I did our thing and it went relatively smooth. There was some kind of hiccups that I would call hiccups. They didn't make any sense to me why those questions were asked, but for the most part, it went smooth. So one of the things that it sparked a thought in my head is like no other generation, no other era, we won't say generation, we'll say era of Native people have had to in-turn or recurate their people. At least I don't think so. I mean, I don't typically you put someone in the ground, they're in the ground. You put them in the hills, they're in the hills, and that's kind of it. But we're of the first people and that have had to like mitigate that, come up with stuff to like individuals are in museums, so let's reintern them or whatever it is, the belief people have different beliefs. So my question to you was, do you think there's any bad luck associated with handling human remains? Go.
Oh man, yeah, that's a good one. It reminds me of whenever I watch anything about Egypt and the Egyptians, I always wonder what do those local people think, I don't know how far removed they are from that culture that, built those pyramids and built the tombs and all that stuff. But, they're in there helping out. I don't know what they feel about all that is, but I wonder if one day they're going to say, this is enough's enough. We're going to repatriate all those things, return them back to the pyramid.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Because in the world of archaeology, Egyptology has become its own thing because it was so big,
Oh yeah.
And can you imagine?
Yeah.
There was an international heritage law that required the return of any items found in graves in at the pyramids, man. I can't even imagine.
There'd be quite the dust up.
Unintended.
I can't even think of that. Yeah,
Dust,
dust, sand, desert,
Egypt,
sandstorm. Egypt. I get it. I got the. So I don't know. I think this is what I think when initially, when you say that, I think there's a certain taboo currently in the current culture that if you handle human remains, that there's a protocol or there's a way that you have to go about to cleanse oneself, I suppose you could say. Whether or not, if you don't do that, I'm not sure what the consequence is. I'm trying to go back into the index of things that I know. So it must be for some reason. But that leads me to believe, or leads me to wonder about what's the duration of that restriction. And I think that's what you're talking about. So remains that are thousands of years old. Like if I handled the bones of someone that was thousands of years old, is there still the attribute of this, whatever it is, bad luck or something bad's going to happen if I don't take care of myself in a certain way? I don't know, because if you ascribe to the belief of what happens after you die, the stories of what happens after you die, right? So after you die, there's many different tribes have different meanings about what happens. But at some point, the soul or the spirit of that person moves on somewhere else. And the work is done. The body remains as this decomposed elements of the earth. So I don't know. What is the because okay, so there's a sensitivity among people in your line of work about even exposing living indigenous people to human remains. Do you remember that time we went to Indiana and they gave us a warning when we went down into that museum? And they said,
we went to the Mathers or something museum,
yeah, and they said, okay, just a warning, we have this curtain here because there's human remains behind here. Just as they're trying to be sensitive to, I guess, a certain culture's belief about even viewing human remains.
And probably what they were consulted, because probably they brought in tribes and said, how should we conduct our work or whatever. And so I'm assuming some representative of a tribe said, we don't even want to look, that's taboo or something, but go ahead. Yep.
No, so that leads me to believe, well, how much of, I don't know. I'm wrestling with this same problem right now in the line of work I do. How is things and traditions and ways from 100 years ago transferable or translatable to today? And it's kind of the same issue in a way. I mean, in the past, I don't know if there was a lot of instances of exhuming people, probably none. I mean, that's kind of weird, a weird thought. So you never really encounter like, at least in my neck of the woods, maybe somewhere else. Cause I know there's other tribes that, their tradition was that, and I think there's a tribal group up here that traditionally used to carry the remains of their loved ones for a year's time on their backs until that time that was over, then they could bury those remains. Say what you were going to say, because I cut you off.
Well, just so our casual listener knows, a lot of these remains we're talking about aren't like stuff that, like, we're not talking about caskets. We're talking about, for whatever reason, Native North America has been studied quite a bit. And so there was an era where a lot of human remains, graves were robbed, graves were disrupted, or kids died or passed away at boarding school.
Yeah.
or on trips, and they would house these remains in curation facilities, museums, school archives, whatever.
Yeah.
So when NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act was passed, it required that all these institutions give a list to all the tribes of what they have that qualifies under this law. So the heavy hitters are items of patrimony, funerary objects, and human remains. So any of those can, if you can prove cultural affiliation or our land, cultural affiliation through land, you can claim those remains and do with what you see as culturally fit. Okay, now that we're caught up.
Patrimony. Wait, items of patrimony.
Like handed down, inherited items, medicine bundles, pipes, different. I mean, it varies from tribe to tribe, right? Yeah. So my question is really what this comes down to is I like how I caught you. I caught you on something just now.
What?
I caught you.
What is it?
You inadvertently created a scenario that was so distant that it was safe to talk about now. Because this discussion is kind of touchy for a lot of tribes. You may have not even known you did it, but you said,
wait a minute. Let's designate a safe word first going forward in case I get triggered.
Okay.
What's our safe word?
Femur.
Okay. Okay, keep going now.
So you said something about human remains that were thousands of years old.
Yeah.
Which is pretty safe, dude. Like, that was a safe comment because, for one, like, there's only a handful of remains that have been found that are over a certain age. And secondly, the touchy, emotional discussion would be like boarding school kids and mass graves. And and you're in BC where a mass grave was found
many of
them. So what you didn't realize you did, Sean Dean, is that you distanced yourself from the discussion by giving a most far out unique example.
No.
You were like, well, this person thousands of years. I'm like, oh,
well, if we're talking about,
is this what we're doing?
If we're talking about graves on the moon, then we have a different protocol.
You're like, you know what, Aaron, you bring up a good point. Human remains that are found on the moon.
No, man, I'm trying to say, okay, there's a difference between.
Is there? I guess that's the question.
I know, that's what I'm asking.
Do Native people believe that once you die, is that time stop for that individual? Meaning, once they're dead, they're dead. And then whether it's yesterday or 10,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Is there a difference in the designation of that individual? Because here's an example.
Okay.
We talk of respect for the dead. We talk for the proper placement of human remains and disposition and all that.
Yeah.
But Sam Resurrection tells a story, who was one of your tribesmen, of where they killed I believe he was a Blackfeet man. And then after he was dead, each of the war party struck a coup on him.
Yeah.
And he was dead already.
Yeah. Among other things.
And we don't
need to talk about. Well, okay.
So this for example,
okay,
what is that?
Keep going.
Give me. Okay, so
this is it. So that's recent death. Recent death.
Yeah,
and you're right. You're right. So we have to put it in a frame. What do they call it?
I caught you.
A temporal scale. No, you didn't catch me. Catch me nothing. Okay. I'm putting it on a temporal scale, a time scale. Okay. So death, from what I understand, from what I've been come to know in the things that I do. Yeah. So there's a period of time that the body is, and the for lack of a better word, the spirit are still together after death. There's a time period.
Okay.
How many days that is? I don't know how and what influence did the church have on that concept? I don't know, but the current belief is because of this is the tradition now, is the wake,
Mhm.
the wake that happens, the spirit and the body are still together for those days, and those are your last remaining days that you spend with that person. After that time, then they're off on their journey, and sometimes that journey can take a long time if they have unresolved business. If they don't have unresolved business, then they're off onto the Milky Way to the happy hunting grounds right away. So I can see in that scenario you said, where the torturing or counting the coup of the body of the dead, I can see that the infliction of revenge or whatever, that's it seems to be an active thing on an existing manifestation of that enemy in the body and the spirit together. I almost started saying it like like a Hail Mary there.
You almost went into it. You almost went wake mode on us.
The body and the spirit.
Yeah,
All I had to do is throw a holy in there, and that'd have been a hymn, or
the mind. Yeah, then you would have been hymn mode. Okay. So I've been wrestling with this because along with cultural protocols, which I think are appropriate, have come to, for me, and what I'm experiencing in the last few years is sometimes I feel like a lot of these cultural things we've adopted are abnormal. Maybe that's not the word.
Okay. Try again.
Unfounded.
Maybe? In what? In
for example,
accustomed traditions.
Yep. So for example, something we hear modern today is, you've seen human remains, don't touch them, don't fiddle with them, don't ever mess with them.
Yes. We get told
I don't buy it.
Okay. You know what? I'm partially with you, because here's an example. The hardcore gamblers back in the day. Now this is like 1900 forward. I don't know. I'm sure it doesn't happen now, but if a like prolific gambler had passed away, they might go find that grave, dig him up, and get his bones to make the hand game set on him, to get good luck in their gambling.
Yeah, I mean that to me, the way I understand Native belief, especially in our region of the Rockies, that fits. What you said to me is not like, what? They did what?
Yeah, it's not like shocking.
It may have been that 20 years ago for me, or even 15 years ago for me. But of course, we're always learning, and we're always getting into the deeper and the deeper of our culture, and and as you become a practitioner, your understanding, gains, right? Leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't shock me, because we know that if we really were afraid of the dead and death, then would we keep scalps?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think there's a clear difference between what the influence of the church versus what our traditions used to be prior to that. I believe that. And I can see that. That goes along with the story you were telling last time about the owl. And our partner Mike said, "Wow, sometimes owls die." That's a pretty practical thought, and I think it's the same. It goes the same with the human. Yeah, sometimes people die, and the belief from that was preserved from prior to the priest coming was sort of preserved by the priests when they were investigating, like trying to get the older folks at that time to verbalize what a soul was. They wanted to say, okay, how would you describe this idea of the soul? And so they're in that time in 1830s or whatever, the word that come out was the description. It was the lining of the body. The lining of the body is how they described it. And it goes along with kind of the belief that your this body you have is just something you're I don't know if you say borrowing, but it's not permanent. I think there's always this idea that there's no permanency in the body you occupy. That someday you're going to leave it, and it's just a mashup of elements. I guess I don't know. That's the way. That's a mashup of elements. Yeah.
Right on.
So I believe that. I believe what you're saying in the idea of I don't know what it like this fear, this magnified fear of body, like deceased bodies. I think is probably been magnified by the church beliefs, because you're right. I mean, you can read accounts of like mutilation of the enemy. You don't hear a lot of them, but you hear it, like this disrespect of the body, and I can see that being. I mean, you always hear also that your enemies were respected in a certain manner. There was a manner of warfare that there was a certain amount of respect. But I mean, if you have this belief that the body is just this like a car, well, yeah, just beat the hell out of it. Because in a way, maybe you're not imparting a disrespect to that person because their spirit's going to travel on or whatever. I don't know. I'm thinking crazy now. I'm talking crazy. I'm just fleshing it out.
It makes me wonder because even you and I who are not Christian,
right?
It makes me wonder how much of this already is influenced by the church.
Yeah, I know.
It has such a profound effect on the way we think and the way we view the world that even people who say we're not Christian or we don't do practice that way. I mean, it's not a disrespect to the church. It's a fact, right? Like this is just the way we.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder how much of the death culture, or what would you call that? What is that? Like funerary practices or mortician practices?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What's the term?
That works.
Yeah.
I mean, you would know more than I would. Yeah.
How much of that would be? How much of that is influenced by the church? Because that also, the practice of, let's say the mortician practices, we'll call it that. Those practice shape our continuing thoughts, right? So if we say this is how we grieve, this is how we put people away, then that is the foundation on which we base what happens after. That.
Yeah. I just, when you're talking like that, I realize that I constantly have to monitor kind of what I'm saying to see if it's something that might be influenced from other religion. Not like you said, not to be disrespectful, but to say, okay, what was, if I'm talking about 300 years ago, am I really talking about 300 years ago? Or talking about?
No, in fact, this is the first time on the podcast where we're getting into a subject that I, honest to God, don't know.
Yeah.
Like I'm really starting to be like, wait a second. So as a preservation officer, my job is to make decisions on behalf of the tribe. So one of these is to take human remains. Well, when I first kind of scoped some elders, and the initial reaction was, nope, we don't mess with the dead, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Well, that's because of the type of question I asked them.
Yeah.
Right. I went up to them and I said,
didn't do your homework.
Yeah.
Or you come in kind of blank slate.
I come in blank slate. I really, and I went against my better judgment, and I asked them one of those general, what do we do with the dead? And they said, we don't mess with them.
Yeah.
Don't mess around with that stuff. Okay.
Where you could have honed in the question a bit better.
Yeah. And so then I did a round 2 later, like 6 months later, because I kind of had to wrestle with this idea, because we have like 12 outstanding NAGPRA cases right now. So, I mean, they need resolved. Like it's on my desk. I can't just say, know what my elders said. Yeah. So then I go back, and then I just asked general questions about practice during death. What do we do? What's the Crow way of doing something?
Yeah.
In that, I started to have to sift and filter and say, okay, that's clearly a church thing. That's a Crow thing.
Yeah. From the best of your knowledge.
From the best of my knowledge, which I admit was limited in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So one of the practices when somebody dies, and it's still practiced amongst certain families is if an individual dies in the home,
Yeah.
you cannot take that person out the door.
Oh.
They have to go out a window.
Oh.
Okay. So then I was talking to this older guy. Well, your wife's related to him.
Yeah.
And he said, if you know the rules, you know that rule can be bent and kind of moved. And
Yeah.
really what it is we don't follow the dead.
Yeah.
So we don't take them out the door.
Yeah.
Because that's the same door our kids go through.
Yeah.
So I said, oh, okay. So then I just threw a scenario out. I said, well, what if that individual, and I didn't say this to be crude or mean or disrespectful. I said, what if the individual's big and you can't get them through the window?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, that happens,
Yeah.
You take them out the back door.
The back door.
The least used door.
Okay.
Then he said, what you'll do is you smudge out your house, that door or whatever, you smudge it out, and you might not use it for a little while,
Yeah.
And then so I said, okay, so right there I started having a discussion with a culturally knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
And I realized then that's the case for everything else, probably, that there's, if and then I realized I do this with everything else. Right. If somebody says, well, you don't whistle at night. Well, yeah, you're right. But do you know where that comes from in the story? Because once you know the foundation of something, you know how to navigate within it.
Right. Where you can kind of shift the criteria a bit, or variants of that rule, those kind of things.
Well, and then I started thinking about this famous story that you and I were talking about earlier with these twins, where these two brothers, their mother was killed.
Yeah.
Well, some time passes and they bring their mother back to life. So then I thought, well, that means they didn't bury her then.
Oh, yeah.
In a scaffolding, or they said they knew where she was at, and they took her tools, her wooden tools, and they started playing with them, and that caused her to move around and kind of be like, hey, and she came back to life. They brought her back to life, So then I thought, okay, so on that story, they're messing with the dead.
Yeah. What's up with that? Yeah.
What's up with that? Yeah.
What's up with that?
What's up with that? You ever watch Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I got an answer. I'm not even hinting right there. No. What I'm telling you is it led to my own inner discussion of, okay, there's instances where people are being messed with after death.
Yeah, which seems contrary.
Which seems contrary to what we're being told today, which is don't mess around. Yeah. And I understand, I'm speaking in general terms here. Yeah. Like there's tribes that probably have really strict protocols and rules. But then I started thinking about that. I said, you know what? I don't know. It's just not adding up. So go ahead. Go.
I'll put it in the category of something that we have to combat a lot, and that's this romanticization. And I think it goes beyond that. It's like this, what do they call it? Like panism or
an Indianism or something.
I mean, but specific to like this, like internally, where we apply a rule and it's applied across everything. I think I think we do that to ourselves because number one, we don't know, because the people who did know died and it didn't get transmitted. So we have just one small piece of that, and we think that applies to everything. Like the phenomenon of these what do they call them? This positionality statements. That's kind of an example. So somebody did it, and somebody thought, oh, that's what we need to do. The next thing, all of Indian countries doing these self-location statements before they give a talk. My name is this. This is what I do. This is where I'm from. These are my people. This is the land I come from. And that's all right. But I don't think it, I try to break that mold and say, no, how would I converse with somebody just naturally? I don't go up to them and say, hello, I'm Dr. Shondine Pete. I got my doctorate in this, and that. I work at this place. This is my mom. This is my dad. This is where they come from. These are their people. This is how I'm connected to this land. That's crazy. I mean, somebody would just walk away. This guy's cuckoo. Or what is he talking about? But the natural flow of like just human to human talk, human to human things. I think that's true. And it might be true in this case where there's a little piece of information that got passed forward. People took it as the gospel, then they apply it forward. And then it gets lost about where that come from, the instance in which it arrived. This happened back home too, with me too. And it's very similar to what you said. The old belief, as far as I know, I mean, old, I don't know, you can qualify that, but the belief prior to now was that the same thing, you don't follow the body. So because in that way, that person is looking back, picking the people that they're going to take with them. Like, oh, I'm going to miss these people. I'm going to take them with me. But in the tradition of the funerals today, it's this grand parade where the body's in front and everybody's grieving and mourning behind it. When what I was told was it should be the opposite. The people should be leading the body to the graveside, wherever it's going to be buried, so that person can't look at who they're going to pick to take with them. Kind of the same concept. But to break that tradition is hard. It's hard, even though the attempts were made to describe it and to say the purpose of it, why it's important. The tradition to follow the body to the grave is so ingrained in people. Even if you explain the logic and the danger of it, it's just not accepted. So it seems to be that kind of case. What you're talking about, like, we don't mess with so somebody like you went along and asked that question, what do we do? What about the body? Yeah, don't mess with it. And then because maybe they didn't want to inquire further, it just got passed forward. And they asked that person says the same thing to whoever asked them. I don't know. It makes sense?
Mm-hmm. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That happens with our with indigenous people. We adopt these things that seem right for the best purpose. I think
the intention is good because it's typically because you want to do the right thing, or you're trying to mitigate what you don't have in place there. So then you have to do the next best thing, or what you think is. So you might borrow something, or you might take an instance that you know of in the past, and you'll resolve it through that. Unknowingly, you can set the precedent for things that are not typical to your people.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, I think that's okay if we're filling a void with something that seems like a good tradition, or like it seems to make sense. That's cool, but I think it's when we get stagnant, when we stop asking questions, we just blindly follow. I think that's where we kind of go wrong. And in a lot of sense, a lot of our traditions kind of fell victim to that through like the 60s and 70s, when there was this revival of, at least among where I come from, this revival of things. They come in from other places, from the AIM movement, and then they just became tradition without really investigating it, because we didn't have nothing. We didn't have access to archival material for whatever reason. All the old people who knew are dead and gone, and we just got handed what we got handed. But I think now we have a little bit more power to sift through all that crazy stuff that anthropologists collected and find out what some truths might have been, and experiment around with what might be more close to what seems to make sense. If you know what I mean.
I do. I mean, yeah.
Now throw out that safe word throw out that safe word if you think
femur. No, I think that's the problem, is like today my knowledge and my confidence was challenged. And so then it made me think, instead of me locking myself in my office and doing and being like, I'm gonna research this, I'm gonna be like, no, let's talk about it. We'll hash through it, because the truth is my gut was telling me what to do. And I was saying, okay, based on the knowledge that I've collected over the entirety of my adult life, and my professional, my hobby, my own culture, a large part of my upbringing, and my professional work have all geared towards the same goal of understanding Native people, but for sure Crow people. So then I part of me was like, you got to trust what you've been doing, like, well, if you're doubting yourself now. And then I also thought, every generation has to face questions and challenge their own beliefs. We selfishly just say, well, because we have a pretty good ACE card, which is non-Indian people. So that's pretty easy. Our challenge is saying we're always against the mainstream society, the colonizer, whatever it is.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
That's kind of our fallback.
That's our fallback.
We can raise our fist against the man.
Where in the old days they were making hard decisions against their own people, against other tribes, against whatever. But they were still making hard decisions. Ours is easy to say. We know that the trajectory of it, which is that's the us versus them, which I don't think it necessarily should be. People have to make hard decisions. They've always had to make hard decisions. So when I tell people, we're going to rebury some human remains, they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing what every Crow has had to do and for every generation, is make decisions that are hard to make, but you make them culturally sound, and you take your steps appropriately. But it's more irresponsible to leave these human remains in limbo.
Right. Or is it? Because, what you said at the beginning was, is it really that sensitive? Should we be that concerned about 1,000-year-old bones?
No. And the reason I'll say is because we don't run into that. We don't run into 1,000-year-old. All my NAG proclaims, all the stuff I know is all stuff within the last 150 years.
Okay, so we worry about 150-year-old bones. If really there's no.
That's a good question. Like if they're in a museum. Do we say, you know what, they've been there for this long, leave them there? That's a tough question. Or do we say, you know what, we're not in like the greatest place ever right now, culturally, socially. Maybe it is because of the mistreatment of certain things. Because you know how Native people will connect. We try to connect the dots, look for solutions. So I would say, whatever we've been doing for the last 125 years, let's stop doing that.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
It's not working.
Okay.
It's not working.
I lost you, man. I lost you.
Meaning what you were saying earlier, is it really that bad to just leave them where they are? And now I'm thinking, maybe it is, because whatever we've been doing, which is just leaving them there, it's not working.
Okay. I got you. So evolving the thought of how to deal with human remains that fits in today's reality. That makes a lot of sense, because if you ascribe to what we were talking about before, where it doesn't. The taboo of human remains was probably not that big a deal, because the situation was far different. I think
so.
But today,
culturally competent people,
right.
It all.
Today you got, you go to a museum and you see somebody's bones. That's a totally different thing. But is it different than go back in time 300 years, seeing your grandpa's scalp on somebody's shield.
I want to say it's different because of
Yeah.
intent, right?
Yeah,
Intent
yeah,
has to be that part of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, we know we're not going to parade around with fingers and things like that.
We don't do that no more.
We don't do that no more. But here, it triggered a thought when you were talking.
Triggered. Okay.
We were talking about holy items,
Yes.
medicine bundles, creating a creation facility to bring holy items that are in museums back to the Crow Reservation.
Okay.
We got a lot of kickback, right? We got a lot of kickback from people saying, we don't know how those were handled. Leave them alone. Don't mess with them.
Yeah.
And I see this across Indian country, especially in our region, right? The Northern Plains, Rocky Mountains. I hear this a lot. But then what I noticed was who was telling me that. So I kind of had to like judge people a little bit. I had to say, what do they do?
Yeah.
What do they do? What do they do?
Yeah.
These are all people who are satellite participants of the culture. I started noticing this trend. They're just like a satellite. They orbit what's going on.
Not necessarily immersed.
No,
is that what you mean?
That's what I mean.
Okay.
So when I specifically started targeting people who are the practitioners, the owners of these rights, these ways, then I started asking them questions. Okay. One guy told me, he said, I agreed in the 60s when they said, let's not bring these bundles back, these holy items, keep them. We don't know what he said. I no longer have that thought. Not because I'm contradicting myself. It's because back then that was the right decision to make.
Back then. Importantly.
Now we're in such dire straits culturally, socioeconomically. We're struggling with a lot of things that a lot of people don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
The underworld, right?
The underbelly.
Then we were all culturally strong people in the 60s. Now we're not. Maybe it's time for them to come back, those things, and maybe it will restore something. So then I thought, why are we so dogmatic? Like, nope, that's what our elders said in the 50s. That's the way we have to think now. And I'm like, wait a second. They were making the decision that they saw fit best for the time.
Yeah.
Why can't we make the same decisions now? We still live in that. A guy named Roger Stopp said, us Crows, we like to live in the old. He said, we don't have no new medicines. Nobody goes and fasts and get new medicines. Yeah. We still live off of the old. So I'm kind of thinking maybe that's his same concept. Was like in years past, where there's always regeneration, rejuvenation, something new, something. Let's make a new decision. Hey, let's revisit that topic. So I think I really believe call to action.
Call to action. Red alert.
This subject needs to be revisited.
It does, man. And you know what? It's happening. And I had a discussion about this today, oddly. And the thing you said about the maybe we need this now, where, as it was said in the past, we don't need that anymore. I've seen that too. I've seen that happen recently within the past year or so. That kind of shift where folks are saying, okay, yeah, maybe we were, I wouldn't say we're wrong, but you're right. Maybe we need it now. But okay, so making this this hot topic of Indigenous research, Indigenous knowledges. I kind of challenge the idea of are we producing new knowledge now? And it's the same thing what you said. Are our young people, fasting and getting the rejuvenation of the songs and the medicine ways? And not really. And I think it follows suit with that same question that you see in academics about what is Indigenous knowledge, what is Indigenous research, all that stuff. In my same message, I say, yeah, that operates in functioning cultural communities. It's happening. There's new knowledge being created. It's probably not like what our old ones or ancestors used to do, But I think the more we do it, the more we push the envelope and question things. I think that's a natural human thing. And then I think that's what shifts that idea among the people who really know, or who can see between the different generations of the need that's out there. And so, yeah, that, and in that way, like a purpose is revealed. We talk about knowledge there should be a purpose to it. There should be an intent to it. Those two things. If it's not purposeful, and if it's not having a specific intention in the community, we don't really care. We don't really need it or use it. Like, we could care less if there's another manned mission to the moon. We don't need to be included in that. We don't need to have, be a part of an equity, diversity, and inclusion to be part of a manned mission to the moon. It doesn't matter to us. I don't think. To me, it doesn't matter. There's far bigger problems in our community that are more practical. And I think it goes along with that. What you're saying is noticing those trends and changes. That's the real research. That's the real research that happens in our communities. That could come really close to when somebody asks, like a non-native asks, well, what is Indigenous research? Well, it's this. You can't see it. You can't see it because you're not living in that community. It's hard to see. And it might even be harder for Indigenous scholars like us to illustrate, to write down, to show a flow chart of that. I don't know. It just doesn't seem. I mean, we could, I guess. I don't know.
There's just no amount of professionalism or knowledge that can make a histogram fit us. I mean,
I beg to differ.
As you would. More of a pie chart because we're circle
That's
people.
Funny. Yeah. More of a scatter.
Yeah.
Radar plot.
Yeah, radar plots. Oh my God. Femur.
Hey. No, I think you're hitting something that's really important, and like you said, this contradiction in the idea of death. You always got to insert that scale of time in there, and that's a weird one too, because time is linear in a way, but it's like for natives, some people think, no, it's circular. We think circular, and I don't know, not all the time. Some people do, but I don't think so.
I used to wholeheartedly buy that concept, but again, it's like this same thing. The more and more I get involved with traditional people, and language and ceremony and culture and utilize it, not just reading about it or asking people about it, but doing it. And then I have kids, and so then that changes you quite a bit too, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm realizing, like, some of these things, for one, I don't know if they matter.
What doesn't matter?
This, like the academic argument that has always been like,
I know
we don't think linear. We think like, okay, whatever, dude. Like,
to what end?
If that's what we're gonna waste our time in academics talking about is decolonization and indigenizing and all, you've already missed the boat. You've already missed the boat because for one, we spend more bandwidth trying to define these terms and what they mean to all of us. It's like, come on, dude, we could be doing some badass and just let the mind work. Like, if I said, Shandine, I want you to research this topic, I'm not gonna fucking say, what theory are you going to use, or what?
What's your methodology?
No, I'm going to back off and I'm going to let you do your thing. And because I know your foundation, not in academics, but in culture, I know that what's going to be given to me is Indigenous research.
Yeah.
Does that mean I can write a paper saying this is how it is? Man, I'm beginning to think I can't, or I'm just not there yet. And obviously, you might be.
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean. And this kind of one of the messages I delivered today was that idea of okay, so if you compare, and it's really dumb, but to say, okay, the Western traditions of research and indigenous research, traditions of research, like you said, we already missed the boat if we're trying to cross compare those, because they're different. None's better than the other. They have a purpose for a specific reason, and that's cool and everything. But when we talk about so we're talking about like indigenous scholars trying to get them tenured or trying to get promotion in the university system, they have to produce or prove their scholarship, and generally that means you got to produce papers. And I had a little brief discussion about this, and I said, we do the work. It doesn't come out in a paper, but the fact that I have to take, like, if you asked me a question, like you said, tell me about this, I have to do research on that in my head. I go through the things that I know. I ask so and so. I ask this other person about it. Maybe I'll read some old archive material about it. But then I'll also explain that maybe to my kids, maybe to another individual. And it's not like it's too hard to compare like as what that would be as far as a Western system. But that's all the work that I do. And it takes a long time, because you have to reframe that thought, to ask somebody, to ask the right question at the right time, at the right moment of the right thing. That takes a lot of work. Because you're trying to elicit some little nugget of information that might help you. And that's really that's the dissemination process, because then you might fire that person up about it. So, oh yeah. I remember that. Or maybe they didn't know nothing about it. So then they tell so-and-so about it. It spreads from there. Message might come back that that's wrong, or, you're crazy. Then there's this debate in the community about what it is and what it isn't. And then that ultimately something comes out of that. Whether people accept it, whether it morphs into something else, that's all part of this. It's the same thing as writing a peer review article in a way, not exactly, but that's the work a lot of Native people do. And it's not something that not housed in the institution. Go ahead.
Is it a lot, the work of a lot of Native scholars?
Well, okay. It's the work of some.
Because I'm not attacking anybody.
No.
And I know we're kind of off the subject now of the NAGPRA stuff, but I think we pretty much talked about that. But
yeah,
I mean, we're a research podcast, so we should talk about research. But when we were doing the Indigenous Research Center stuff, for that short time, I felt like we kind of immersed ourselves in what was out there. And we were very careful about who we wanted to invite to our colloquiums, to our
right,
which was all founded in stuff we were already kind of doing as a hobby. You know what I mean? Like you and I, we've been friends for 22 years or 21 years now, and or whatever, 20 years probably, right?
Femur.
and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Researching the researchers.
Yeah.
I might say something a little controversial, but
okay.
I wasn't finding it, man.
Yeah. No, you're right. And there's some who know, some who get it. There's some who are on a path to reconnecting and understanding it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right.
And one thing I noticed too, though, is when you would talk to that researcher, the individual, you're like, this guy gets it, right? This lady
you
gets
just know.
it.
You just know.
But then sometimes they would translate that to their academic work, and you're like, what happened? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know you've run into this where you're like, when I talk to that person and what versus what I'm reading, that's not. And I think it's because of the institutions they come up in or something where they're unknowingly maybe fall into a certain groove of writing style or citation or whatever it is. And that can really affect the way a product is made, right?
Oh yeah. And not only that, but like the criteria of where you're trying to publish it. They might only accept certain subject matter written in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Your work gets pretty narrow. And
It's out there.
It might not come out the way it needs to be. Yeah, it is out there, and there's some individuals who definitely understand it. There's probably, not a lot who I haven't seen a whole lot that can translate that into something that seems and feels authentic of for today. I mean, there's some examples I think that are pretty good, but it's evolving. It's evolving,
It is.
and it's hard to say what's right.
It's
or
so
wrong
young.
Right, it is.
It's so young. I mean, the idea of taking authentic indigenous knowledge and putting it in an academic setting is so young.
It is.
And the fact is we could listen to these podcasts in 10 years and be like, what the fuck?
What an idiot.
I mean, in 5 years, probably,
we could listen to episode 1 and have a good chuckle. Maybe,
but what a shame, we've had Mike Laframboise on here before, but when we were doing the Indigenous Research Center, he proposed this topic of research that was not approved, and we can talk about that now, right? But it was not approved by our institutional review board and culture committees. But to me, out of all the stuff we did for the IRC in those days, that was the one thing I was like, this is going to be it. This is going to be the template. If we guide him in the right direction, the question he's asking is a purely indigenous question.
Right.
And that really only Native people can ask because of the diffusion of ceremony and what that subject matter was. And
right.
Man, it was so specific to what we deal with. I was excited for it, and it didn't happen. So I was like, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know. These golden opportunities, people just don't get it. People get scared, It's the whole idea of what you're talking about death and
it was almost the same thing.
It's almost the same thing. Well, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, why not?
Confusing fear and respect.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, that's what it is, I guess.
And I think a lot of it was misunderstanding about what that might have been and who it was for.
But again, it's having an institutional review board that is not practitioners.
Right. Importantly.
So that question to them was so foreign.
Yeah.
It was such a foreign question. And we're here it is. Here's a good example for our listeners. We're Native people that were asking a question that Native people normally ask when you talk amongst traditional people. These are topics they talk about.
Yeah.
And we had a researcher ask this question. Ultimately, this research idea was denied. But it was so funny to me because I'm like, you can't get any more indigenous than what we were proposing. And yet we were stopped. And I was like, wait a second. This is you're handicapping the very, very mission of the center. Yeah. Right. At that time. Now we're in positions where I think we could do that. And knowing what I know now, we didn't need them. We don't need them.
No.
Mike can still do that.
Yeah.
And it'll manifest in other ways because now I'm a little more getting out of academics helped me because now I'm like, wait a second, we were even in academics, we were limited to academics.
Yeah. In a sense. In that sense. Yeah. Yeah. We've built these institutions. We've modeled them after Western institutions. We've modeled committees after just non-indigenous types and ways of thinking, and that's like it's going to be one of the horsemen, one of the four horsemen of the demise of, or it could be, we're like, what did we say at the beginning, when colonizing ourselves, or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're doing the work. We're doing the work of colonizing ourselves for the most part.
We were talking about that earlier on the phone.
Oh yeah, earlier, yeah. And it's just, but how do you open people's eyes and say, hey, man, what do we do? I think people have been burned so much, like the generation prior to us, they've been burned so much for whatever happened. But I think it's just way too much for people to open their eyes and say, well, God, we got a whole generation of young people that are wanting to emulate the ideas of the past, which is really just tackling the hard philosophical questions that are important to us, and not to write a paper, not to write a book, not to become famous and grandstand, but because we have issues, man. We got issues, and we're not. It's like we're not leaning on our traditions to help those. We would emulate an indigenous model of addiction after somebody researched at a university before we try to emulate what we had in our own ways. And I think that's partly because we don't know that anymore. It's backwards. It's backwards.
It's backwards. In some cases, we do know it, but we're afraid of responsibility.
Yes. You're right.
And that's a whole nother maybe that's a whole nother podcast or a whole nother research topic. But I think it's time that like Native people, and I'm guilty of it too, man.
Yeah.
Like we're afraid of responsibility or inconveniencing somebody or something, or we use finances, time.
Yeah. Well, because it's really tied to that, like economics, man. We got to live, we got to work. And to say I'm going to commit my life to helping my people in a traditional way, who can do that? Who can do that?
Or it's also tied to lineage. I got a funny story, and you know I'm not going to say no names, but you know this. I asked a question one time about when I was living at Flathead, and I said, "Are you going to go participate in that dance?
Yeah,
this particular ceremony?" And they said, "No. It's not the way my dad taught me how to do it, so we're not going to do it." And then I thought in my mind, well, go and help out.
Change it,
or just be there, and then maybe they'll say, "Hey, how about, do you want to let's use your songs, or let's use, and then
are we doing this right?"
Yeah. Instead, stay home. Just stay home.
Stay home and let it die.
Stay home and be the problem.
Stay home, complain on Facebook about it.
Complain that your family's the only one that does it right, but then you guys don't do it though. You know what I mean? And put on a dance. See, you guys over there at Flathead are a lot like a lot of tribes here, where really it comes down to the sponsor, right? Like even though some of that practice has died, but really that's the root. A sponsor, someone can go to that particular individual who owns the right to do these things, and that right's determined by a lot of things. But and you could say, "I want to put this on." Okay, that person tells you, "Get this A, B, C, B, blah blah blah." Okay.
Yeah.
So instead of being the solution and say, "Well, sponsor something," then go do it. Sponsor something. Shut up. Go sponsor something. So if I leave you with any message to our listeners, sponsor something.
Quit complaining and shut up.
Sponsor something. Whether you're Navajo, you're Sioux, Lakota, Colville, Umatilla, Shuswap, sponsor something.
Yeah. What's the block? What's the block? What's the block to doing that? Why do people not do it? I don't know. We can go another hour. Let's not do that.
I know. Let's not do it. And that wasn't the point of the podcast today. For our listeners, I was fired up today because of the National NAGPRA meeting, and I was like, I called Sean Dean and I was like, "Dude, let's do a podcast. I want to talk. I feel like talking." And he was like, "All right." But then it turned out to be, man, this is one of the most satisfying podcasts I've ever done with you. So
it is. I think we made progress. We made some understanding. I mean, we knew it, kind of knew it already, like here and there, but to hear it echoed back, to hear some things confirmed, like, okay, I get that. You're thinking the same as mine, or I wasn't thinking that, but I was thinking this. Now I get it. We just got to keep carrying that forward, man. We got to keep carrying that forward. All 50 of our listeners. Carry that forward. 50 is better than 0.
Remember what I said to you? If we were in a room and 50 people in there listening to us talk, that's a lot of people, man.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people.
It's actually uncomfortably a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah,
You're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
why
And
there's so
shout
much
out to
people
our
here?
our few sponsors. I gave them a little shout out on the last episode. We got
Oh,
a few
yeah.
people keeping us going, help pay for our website and our podcasting service. Man, that really helps. We need more though. That's my that's the best advertising pitch I can give. Cool,
Yeah.
man.
If you guys got something that you want to sponsor this podcast, we're happy to have it. I don't think, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, we're not doing this to make money or sell
No.
time. So it's not like
We don't need it.
we don't need it. It's appreciated because
It
we
helps.
just we're gonna talk anyway, man. So we're gonna
Yeah. But man, you need some new gear there.
yeah.
Well,
I
we
do,
need
man.
somebody to sponsor Aaron a boom arm for his mic because he's just pitiful over there. He can barely set up the mic we bought him.
Hey, I got the nano going.
It sounds good today. You must have did something.
I just didn't mess with it.
Cool, man. That's good
Yeah.
convo.
Well, anyway,
Anyway,
let's say bye to our listeners and we can stop recording. But
All
thanks
right.
again, everybody. That was a fun one.
femur. That was a lame bye-bye. That's why I said femur.
Stop recording, dude.
All right. Thank you for joining us on this episode. And if you want to learn more about what we're up to, go ahead and search Tribal Research Specialists in Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, and check out our other sites. And if you want to contribute to the show, go ahead and look us up on Patreon. We would appreciate your donation.